Hello, it's me, and once again, it is time for Tutorial Tuesday. Welcome back to Tutorial Tuesday, where each week and every Tuesday, we bring you a brand new, fresh photography tutorial. This week, we're taking a break from the Lightroom tutorials, although we can make our way back there if that's what you want to see. Let me know in the comments. I'm always keen to make the stuff you guys want to see. But this week, we're going to talk about something which actually comes up all the time for me. We are looking at how you can take a self-portrait and actually the best ways that you can do it. So we're going to look at 3 different ways that I actually do this. And I use all 3 of these different techniques in different situations for different things to achieve slightly different results. But taking a portrait of yourself is both a very useful thing to be able to do just generally, right? It's great to be able to update headshots and photos of yourself in various, professional capacities. If you are a professional photographer, this is a great way of having an image of yourself either for your Instagram, your socials in general, a website, anything like that, right? But it can also be a really useful way of practicing your portrait photography without relying on a model or having someone to take a photo of, because sometimes that can be tricky. It allows you to do it in your own time and really practice things like framing, composition, lighting, all that kinds of stuff. I take photos like this all the time for my work, right? I need to get lifestyle photos of me using cameras and stuff like that for YouTube thumbnails or just generally, right? It's a useful thing to be able to do. So I have to do this all the time. So let's jump in to the 3 different ways that I do this, and we're not even going to talk about just using a self-timer on the camera. Of course, that's always an option, but I never even do that. We're going to do 3 other ways. Okay, the first technique that we're going to look at is the most straightforward and what I consider to be the kind of quick and dirty method, right? It just gets the job done when you need it done. It doesn't matter so much about the editing or about necessarily the resolution of the image. You just need to get an image of yourself for whatever. I use this sometimes for lifestyle shots to give myself a few different options for those kind of lifestyle photos with me with the camera. And that is essentially to set up the camera on a tripod and to actually just film in 4K. Now, like I say, it's not the ideal option, but it does allow me to then take an image out of the video later. I'll do that on my computer in Premiere Pro. I'll actually just go through frame by frame. So essentially I'm shooting at 25 frames a second in 4K, and I'll take one of those frames out as an image. Now I can still do a little bit of editing to this, especially if I'm shooting in something like this. This is 4K, 10-bit, 422, so I've got a bit of room there to play around with the colors, a little bit with the exposure, not a lot, but a little bit. But as long as I've set everything else up, if the lighting isn't too challenging, and if it's a fairly straightforward situation, I can actually get some pretty nice results with this method. And it's a very quick and easy way to just be able to move around in shot and actually get a usable, decent lifestyle image like that. And if the image is being used somewhere where the resolution doesn't matter that much, this is actually a really usable way of getting something pretty quickly. So the method of shooting in 4K doesn't need a load of explanation, right? I'll generally set the camera up to shoot in 4K at an aperture that I'm pretty happy with, some sort of autofocus where it's tracking the subject if that's possible. Otherwise, I'll set the autofocus point roughly where I want my head to be and then check the framing. If the screen is able to flip around, it's fairly straightforward to see where I am in the frame. And then I can move around a bit, try different poses, generally shooting with a shutter speed of around 1/60th of a second, maybe even bumping that up just to make sure I'm getting a nice sharp image. Because I'm not using the actual video footage, I'm just taking the stills, it doesn't matter so much about how the motion blur looks, right? I just want to get a nice sharp image. However, the downside of doing this is that you don't have very much room for editing, right? There's not as much you can do with it because it's not a RAW file, it's not an actual photo. It's just a JPEG taken out of a video file. So what about when we want to do a nice raw photo? Well, that is where I will use one of the following 2 techniques. One of them is to connect my smartphone to my camera. Now, most cameras now have an associated app which allows your smartphone to connect to it so that you can at least control the camera in some capacity from your phone, including taking a shot. This is something that I'll do from time to time. I got some of these images with this technique, and it can be really useful. It allows you to see on your phone a little bit like it's the monitor for the camera, which means you can stand in frame and actually still take the photo. The downside for me for this is that you do have to have your phone in your hand or set a little 2 or 5 second timer, press the button and then move the phone out of shot. So you're still a little bit limited by the fact that you have to have something in your hand, which is not ideal if you want to be doing something else, or if you want to do a lifestyle shot, or if you want to strike a specific pose, or you want a certain look to the photo, right? It allows you a lot of control, and you end up with the raw photo with all the settings that you want, and you can check the framing, all that kind of stuff, but you're still limited with that slight kind of inconvenience of having to actually still press the button on your phone. I've absolutely got some shots that I'm really happy with doing this technique, but my new favorite way to take self-portraits is something that I only recently started doing, but is super useful. Now that is this third technique, and that is essentially to set up your camera to do interval shooting. If you've never done this before, this is essentially where you tell your camera to take a certain number of shots with a certain gap of time between each shot. It's a great way of doing a time lapse, right? We've looked at that. Actually, I think the very first Tutorial Tuesday was all about how to shoot a time lapse using this exact method. And while it is great for that, this is a fantastic way of getting the best of all of these different techniques in one go, so that you get the raw file, you get multiple shots to choose from, you can strike different poses, you don't have to have something in your hand. It's an incredibly useful way to shoot a self-portrait. So we want to set up interval shooting, right? And I will generally set this to take maybe even 100 images with something like 5 seconds between each image. That way I know the camera is just going to keep shooting different images over and over and over again. I'll set up the framing so I can check to see what I like as a kind of setup for a portrait, and then you just set it to start shooting. The first couple of images you'll probably be still setting up moving into the frames. That's fine, because you can just get rid of those later. But after that, you are free to start striking different poses, to move around a little bit, to kind of try out some different things, a little bit like with shooting in 4K and taking the still later, except this time we are shooting with proper actual raw photos, or whatever you want to shoot in. So you've got full flexibility that way. You don't have to have something in your hand to actually control the camera. It's just going to keep taking those shots. You can still move around, change the framing, and you have the massive advantage of the autofocus firing each time the camera takes a shot. That way you can move closer, further away, whatever you want, and the camera's going to focus on you. Now, if you set the autofocus to subject detection as well, you have the freedom to move a little bit around the frame in order to get that shot. That means that you could very easily move quite far away from the camera and still get some great kind of lifestyle, adventure-y photos. There's a lot that you could do with this method. It's a great way if you are perhaps out by yourself and you want to get some nice photos of you in nature, or out and about on a kind of an adventure photo. This is a fantastic way of getting multiple stills without having to worry about all of the downsides of the other methods. Now, you do come away with quite a lot of photos doing this, but in this day and age, that doesn't really matter. It's very easy and quick to go through and get rid of the ones you don't want. Loads more room to edit that exposure, the colors. You can really make those images your own. So when you want that full resolution, great quality image where you have full flexibility for how it looks as an end result, that is always now the way that I'll do it. It just feels like the best of all those possibilities. There's still a place for those other options, but when I want that full quality, interval shooting is always the way that I'll do that now. So those are the 3 different methods that I use to take different self-portraits, which I do all the time because I generally work alone a lot of the time. So it's actually super useful to be able to do this. But I'd love to know if there's any other methods you use that I haven't covered here. Maybe there's something I've not thought about. Let me know in the comments. Let me know as well down there if there's something specific you'd like to see in a future Tutorial Tuesday. I'm always keen to make the stuff you guys want to see. So whether it's more of this kind of stuff where we're talking about practical stuff, or whether it is more of the editing side of things where we are looking at Lightroom. I love making those videos. I'm a big fan. So if there's something specific you'd like to see in Lightroom, we've actually had some great ideas as well. So we'll absolutely aim to get to those in the near future as well. But this is one I wanted to make because I have been shooting a lot of these recently, And actually this new method I'm using, it just clicks so well for me. Of course, there's a full list of all the kit we use for these photos, for this video, all this stuff down in the description, so you can go and check that out for yourself. I will see you in the next video, but until then, as always, thanks for watching.